Our next conversation today is with Democratic Congresswoman Brittany Pettersen of Colorado. Congresswoman Pettersen, thank you so much for coming back on next for the first time since your election to the House and first time since your family of three became a family of four.
I can't believe it's been so long since I've been on your show, but good to be with you, Kyle. Appreciate it.
So you flew cross country with your 4-week-old son in order to vote against the House GOP's budget blueprint last night. Did you do that to make a point, or did you do that because you thought strategically you could be the deciding vote?
I did it because I'm not going to let my inability to vote by proxy, which, as you know, the Republican leadership has denied my ability to vote as a new parent remotely. And I told leadership that if there is any vote, that there is a potential that I can make a difference, I'm going to be there. So I was hoping it was going to be, maybe a couple more weeks before I was traveling across the country with my newborn son. But they ended up pulling it up this week. So we made plans and I traveled with Sam, and, we did make an impact. They weren't expecting me to be there. And I'm sure you were watching, but there was a big pause and scramble after the first vote before they brought up the resolution. They were ultimately able to get the votes, but it's going to also hold the Republicans accountable and put them on record that ended up having to vote yes to get this through.
A moment for parenting instead of politics here. I have never flown with a 1-month-old. It was nerve-wracking enough flying with kids considerably older than that. What was that experience like, having your son in airports and on a plane and so on and so forth?
The night before, I was kind of panicking on every potential thing that could go wrong. And I have another kid, as you know, who's 5. So I've done it many times. He's a gold member status with United, so he's flown with me often. But going with a newborn by yourself is a whole other level of stress. I was really grateful for everybody, strangers who helped me, to TSA agents and members who met me at the gate to help me bring my stuff. I mean, it was quite the undertaking, but grateful, and of course my team in DC who helped support me through it. So we made it happen. Sam is a very good baby, and grateful for that. He's very laid back, and it wasn't as bad as it could have been, that's for sure.
Let's talk about your push for proxy voting or remote voting. You're part of a bipartisan group that has called on House Republican leadership to consider this. Do you get the sense that they're entertaining it at all? Are they just dismissing it out of hand? Where does that stand?
Unfortunately, the Republican leadership is opposed to actually bringing this vote to the floor. What it would allow is for new parents up to 12 weeks to be at home recovering from birth, being with their newborns, making sure that they have that flexibility if something goes wrong. It also makes sure that you're able to vote before giving birth and have that count against your 12 weeks. Like what I went through when I wasn't allowed to fly anymore, and I was stuck in Colorado and unable to have my constituents represented. So while Republican leadership is unwilling to come to the table on this right now, we have overwhelming support on the House floor. We have bipartisan support. We have people that will sign a discharge petition. I know it's a tall order to actually get one of those passed, but we have that option to force a vote to the floor. And that's what the discharge petition is for, is if leadership is not representing the members and what they want to vote on, that you have the ability to force a vote. So that's our next option.
Do you think that proxy voting should be open to members with a variety of medical challenges? I mean, certainly there are a lot of aging members of the House that might take advantage of it. Or do you think that it should just be restricted to new mothers?
No, I think it should have. I mean, I think it's, when we look at aligning it with paid family leave, for if you're taking care of a newborn, if you're getting cancer treatment, whatever that looks like, that you have the ability to have your constituents represented if you have certain medical conditions. People continue to point to in the past when they thought people took advantage of it, which I'll say Speaker Johnson voted, we think, at least 40 times by proxy, and he is unwilling to bring this to the floor and says it's unconstitutional during COVID. But I think that some people did take advantage of it, and there's ways that we can make that work and bring the parameters necessary. It shouldn't just be for new moms, and my resolution is actually for all new parents. It's for dads too. You probably know we have many more dads in Congress than women. We only have 13 voting members who have ever given birth while serving. So this is really limited, but we have also dads who, I talked to Representative Moore from Utah who had a kid in the NICU for, over a month, and his, grappling with whether he was going to be on the House floor to vote or if he was going to be in the hospital with his kid to make sure that he was okay. So, these are things that are common sense. My constituents, I know, overwhelmingly support this, and we need to support every American with the same privileges.
Now, that said, I keep reading reports about members who are voting by proxy anyway, just handing their voting card to somebody else and then leaving the building or leaving town. Have you ever thought about doing that, just giving your card to Joe Neguse or Jason Crow or somebody and telling them to let it rip?
Well, it's against the rules. So for us rule followers, no, I haven't ever debated giving my card to somebody when I'm not in town. And so, this isn't for people being able to go on talk shows. This is about making sure that we have limited circumstances that addresses these challenges that people face, because we're human beings like everybody else, and things happen in our lives, and we should be able to still represent our constituents. This is the 21st century. We can vote remotely. This shouldn't be the barrier that it is.
Let's talk about some of the other issues of the day, specifically President Trump and Elon Musk's remaking of the federal workforce. Do you know how many federal workers have been fired in your district, including whatever's going on at the Federal Center in Lakewood?
Right now, I think while some people who are managing our public lands have lost their jobs, people that they're able to easily get rid of, we still don't know if they're going to shut down the Federal Center. But I'm absolutely concerned about this, and my team is working on this 24/7 to support the people who are going through this. We have whistleblower information, so you can reach out if you have things going on in the agency, and we can support you. Please reach out to our office. This is not only going to impact, critical services that so many of us rely on, like wildfire mitigation, managing our open spaces, the things that we care about deeply as Coloradans. It has a cascading impact on our economy when you're firing thousands of people potentially. I am so sorry, Kyle.
That's fine. Go ahead and silence that. This will appear in the YouTube version for everybody watching this one, but then we'll jump back to what you were saying. Yeah.
This is what it's like. I just got home from flying back home from DC and running in front of a computer. So thanks for your understanding.
No worries. But on that point, I just want to clarify, because we in the local media have had a difficult time coming up with actual numbers of firings of federal employees in Colorado. We've been trying to put it together piecemeal and through anecdotes and what other folks are saying. As a member of Congress, do you feel like you've gotten accurate information on how many of your constituents who are federal workers have been fired?
We have how many people are employed, what's at risk. I don't know the actual number of the people who have currently been let go, but we've been reaching out throughout the district, asking people to tell their stories so that we can capture that, share that, talk about, what their role was, how important it was, what's actually happening on the ground. Because, right now, people are not that concerned around what's happening with firing federal workers. And I think they're going to be concerned once they see things dismantled that they took for granted. And it's reminding them of what we pay for with our taxes and what services those people provide for us. And also the economic impact.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that, because certainly President Trump ran on a pledge to drastically reduce the size of the federal government, and he won the popular vote and he won the Electoral College. How certain are you that he's not giving Americans exactly what they're looking for in a rapid downsizing of the federal government?
Hey, I think that we should look at this when you're cutting budgets, when you're looking at taking away, maybe some unnecessary spending. You use a scalpel. You don't come in, the way that he is with a bulldozer. And this is not how you approach addressing, reshaping our government. And I think that that's kind of a talking point that everybody can agree on, whether you're Republican or Democrat. Cutting unnecessary spending, right? Making government more efficient. That's not a partisan issue, and people do support that. But when you're coming at this, like I said, with the bulldozer, where they're firing people who are essential to our nuclear weapons and threatening our national security, when you're firing all of our air traffic controllers, and you have to worry every time you get on a plane now because you don't know if you're going to crash, whereas before it was incredibly unlikely. We've already seen that just yesterday there were another two close calls. So I know that flying back from DC, I was very scared in the air. And the things that we take for granted, IRS, making sure that you call, you can actually get the help that you need, that you get your tax refunds in a timely manner. Making government work is not just bulldozing the important services that people rely on. In fire mitigation, it's a huge issue in Colorado. So what are we going to do when the people that we rely on to address our wildfires are all fired?
Right now, every Democrat in America in an elected role or leadership position is being asked some form of the question, what should Democrats be doing to respond to what the Trump administration is doing? Here's the lens through which I'd like to ask you to consider that question. You were the first Colorado Democrat in Congress to call for President Joe Biden to get out of the race. A lot of other Democrats eventually came to your view, but you were the first one who was willing to say it publicly. Is there something else that you think needs to be said publicly that your party has to grapple with that might be unpopular, but you think needs to be said right now?
I think that the election was reflective of that people were struggling, and they heard for almost 4 years that it was inflation and that's Democrats' fault. And we didn't have an effective communicator who was countering that at the top. So it was really hard to overcome that, especially with rising costs because of inflation. It didn't matter that we were the quickest, strongest recovery in the world after the global pandemic, and all that Joe Biden and his administration did to bring us to the soft landing that the United States was able to enjoy. But people were still struggling to get by, to pay for groceries, to pay for housing, which is one of the number one issues for people. And so, I think that it was more about those pain points, those economic pain points. And even though nobody except, his very hardcore base thinks that Trump is a good person, they were willing to put that aside if they thought that their lives might get better. And that's kind of the same story that we saw in the previous election with him. It's really difficult to be in that position again, having to relive this where, he's already caused more damage in a very short time than he did in the first go round. So it's hard to grapple with what we're going to see here, but people were struggling, and unfortunately, they ran their campaign about cutting costs for people, about addressing the economy, and they have done anything but that. They've proposed tariffs, 25% for Mexico, for Canada, for Europe, our democratic allies, where we should be sharing in benefits with tariffs, and supporting each other and supporting other democracies through economic exchange. And instead, all those costs are going to come down to consumers. We know that everything that they're focused on has nothing to do with addressing people's economic challenges. And the budget proposal from yesterday is going to gut the things that actually do help people in their lives, and it's going to give tax breaks to billionaires. So people are going to hurt with these proposals, and they're going to remember when they vote next time.
Congresswoman Brittany Pettersen, appreciate your time, especially after a rapid fire 24 hours there in and out of D.C. with your young son flying back to Colorado. You mentioned the idea of affordable housing, and I know one thing that you're working on in Congress is that YIMBY caucus, the Yes in My Backyard folks talking about approaches to affordable housing. We'd love to have you and maybe a Republican colleague on to talk about that, because certainly there's interest in that in Colorado. But we'll leave it here for today. I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Kyle.